concept. And the idea is simply that, and there is a convincing point to this, that after Hegel, we have this famous post-Hegelian break. The whole series of figures, Schopenhauer, Kierkegaard, Marx, but also Freud, the rise of mathematical natural sciences, that simply after this post-Hegelian break, you can no longer be seriously Hegelian. That, it's simply not possible. It's a fake, an anti-historical illusion. If you basically, if you try to be Hegelian today, you simply act as if the post-Hegelian break didn't happen. What was this break? It's easy to establish. It was it was basically what Badiou likes to refer to as anti-philosophy. The idea is that the scene of philosophy, of philosophical ideas, is perceived as a secondary scene of representation, a screen, and then you assert some real, more substantial life process which makes this movement of ideas, sphere of ideas, just a kind of a passive, secondary, illusory reflection. The first one to do this was, of course, even before Schopenhauer, already the late Schelling, Friedrich Schelling, who claimed there is the living reality, irrational abyss of will, of willing, the life of will, which is more substantial than ideas, and that Hegel is simply cheating. He tries to prove this with detailed analysis, how at the beginning of the logic, where Hegel proposes the triad being, nothing, becoming, that becoming is to be actual becoming, already presupposes some positive being. This is how then Schelling distinguishes between positive and negative philosophy. For him, Hegel is a negative philosopher, not in the bad sense, but in the sense of Hegel just deploys the conceptual structure of reality, what reality is, all possible forms. But something is missing, the positive being of reality. As it were, the living substance. Hegel provides just, in his idealism, the grey shadow of reality, which is why Schelling focuses on, as the greatest Hegel's failure, on Hegel's deduction at the end of logic of how logic, when it fully realizes itself in the shape of absolute idea, passes into nature, releases itself into nature. For Schelling, this is no deduction at all. Hegel is simply cheating there. He knows all the time that nature exists, and he just pretends to deduce nature from the self-movement of concepts and so on and so on. That's Schelling. Then Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer is the great anti-Hegelian. Really, personally, he hated Hegel. When he was young, he was already privat docent, this lower level private process at the same Berlin University as Hegel, and I don't know if you know this, he was so competitive that he on purpose did his classes at the same time as Hegel. Of course, nobody came, but he was so furious, and so on, and so on. Although there is one good thing about his family. You know that Goethe was married with that Christiane Vulpius, the lower class girl. He loved her and so on. It was a very long love. Finally, Goethe married her. And she was totally ignored by all high society. One must admit that Schopenhauer, and especially his mother, were honest here. It's a famous saying, Schopenhauer's mother invited once Goethe and his wife, and then when some other guests protested, she said, when this lady is good enough for Goethe's bed, she must be good enough for our table. I mean, it's a nice saying and so on. But what I'm saying is that with Schopenhauer, it's the same. It's the irrational will. The will, already Schelling uses it. This idea that before all notional movement and so on, there is this positivity of the will, of pure willing, which then, of course, later develops in Lebensphilosophy, in life philosophy, then in a similar, although different way, it's Kierkegaard, of course. With him, it's not this stupid, irrational willing, it's the individual with the abstract of believing, this absolute decision, leap of faith, and so on. For Kierkegaard also, this is the intense actuality of subjective authenticity, which cannot in any way be covered up by this abstract Hegelian movement of notions, and so on and so on. And why not? Let's add to this series Marx. For Marx also, you know, you have this famous, in what is the worst of Marx, I think, German ideology, that famous phrase that true science of life is, with regard to speculative philosophy, like real sexual act is to masturbation. Again, this idea that Hegel is mystifying reality, is describing just some kind of ideal, conceptual, pseudo-self movement, and then Marx has all these rather primitive reductions to real life. It's not idea which is developing, moving itself. Is it real people who, while thinking, develop ideas and so on? This old boring idea that Hegel confuses the subject and the predicate. It's not individuals who are predicates or moments in the self-development of the idea. It is idea, thinking, which is just predicate of a real life-asserting individuals and so on and so on. This is what Badiou refers to as anti-philosophy. That is to say, this idea that if at least you and then there are, of course, other elements here where I think a more convincing critique of Hegel can be made. Like, you know, one problem with Hegel, there you really have Hegel's limitation, is mathematics. Hegel dismisses mathematics as so-called spurious, bad, infinity, just repetitive. He cannot see, there is no space for this modern mathematics which includes all the paradoxes of self-reference and so on. There is no space for this in Hegel. There is the problem of natural sciences. You can claim, I think it's more ambiguous, that what Hegel does in his critique of Newton is simply he dismisses Newton as a primitive knowledge, positive natural sciences at the level of some kind of a mechanical approach, and in a more or less romantic way Hegel tries to provide a more organic account of nature and so on and so on. So again, the idea is that all this universe of formalized, mathematicized sciences, which the incredibly important role in production and so on, also the Freudian universe of pure repetition, what Freud called Wiederholungszwang, when things repeat themselves without any Hegelian movement of Aufhebung, where, you know, by repetition you are elevated to a higher level, just pure compulsion to repeat. There simply is no place for all this in Hegel. So again, that's the post-Hegelian break. And again, one can say that this break, this historical break, is a fact. You cannot simply play the game as if this didn't happen and let's return to Hegel. I think you can. Now, why? How? I think I will first just give you the coordinates, then we will return tomorrow to this more in detail. I think that I will not just now give you the demonstration, explanation, just to provide the coordinates. I think that something different happens here. Namely that what should make you suspicious is how Hegel is this totally ridiculous image of Hegel. Even people who have a certain sympathy for example, if they are oriented towards the so-called Anglo-Saxon